you ever hear the tragedy of
Darth Baba.
the Wise?
No.
I thought not. It's not a story the Jedi would tell you. Unfortunately, he taught his apprentice everything he knew. Then his apprentice killed him in his sleep.
Is it possible to learn this power?
Hey, I'm Brian, and welcome to Vinyl Paints. And it truly is a tragedy what happened to these Babar cells. I got these cells from someone who had rescued them from a dumpster. And when they told me this horrific story behind where they found these, they found them at the old chorus building, and there's apparently a dumpster full of Babar cells as well as other shows that had been left there. And had it not been for a windstorm that threw these cells onto the floor, they probably would have been lost to history. The entire dumpster, apparently according to them, was filled with cells, but it had been out there for so long that these were the only ones that were salvageable. And honestly, that kind of is disappointing. As someone who collects cells, I know that there is a big drive towards collecting the fancy cells, the ones that you see in very popular movies and at other shows. But the truth of the matter is that there is so much artistry and amazing things that you can learn from just a cell from a simple show like Babar that are kind of being thrown away or lost or aren't very much appreciated by collectors. So I wanted to showcase this. That's kind of going to go through some of my cells or some of my art production art that's in my collection that doesn't really have a place that fits in with maybe the regular videos I do. These are what I'll call deep cuts. Maybe they're not the most sought after cells or whatever, but I think that there's something that we can learn from them or something that we can do with them. And in the case of these Babar cells, I think my ultimate goal is to try and repair them or try to clean them up. So maybe one of the reasons why I'm a little bit behind schedule releasing videos is because I've been playing a lot of Marvel Rivals lately. And because so many of my projects were being held up by something, I'm waiting on a background, I'm waiting on something to come in the mail. I figured, let's do a quick Marvel Rivals Venom one. And the line art on this took forever. I decided to put it over a black background so you can see all the different shades of blue in there. I'm really excited for this one, but I can already tell it's going to take a long time to paint this one. So let's start painting. So why did I choose Venom? Well, Venom is kind of the original oddity in himself. He's kind of this bizarro version of Spider-Man. And when I first started this video, I really didn't even have a painting involved. I was just doing one part of it was going through my deep cuts or oddities as I call them. And then the other part of the video was showing you some upcoming projects I was working on. This was supposed to be a fill video in between two different videos. But just because of the way timing works out and things happen, those upcoming projects have now been released on this channel already, so it didn't really make sense to release this video anymore. But I noticed that one of the upcoming projects was Venom, and two of the oddities I was showing in this video were Spider-Man, and I thought that was related enough that I can combine them into a new video. I kind of cheated a little bit. I didn't really feel like doing the entire audio again. I find that process very long and difficult, so I kind of just recorded over the Venom parts and kind of fit it into this video. So if there's certain parts of this video that may not flow as normal or might seem like I'm jumping off topic, it's probably because of that. So the first thing I've been working on in the background is I've wanted to make a black watercolor painting background for one of my cell paintings for a while. I've never actually really watercolored before. I must have done one or two when I was in school, but I really don't have that kind of experience. But I felt a little bit bold and I decided to give it a try. And it turned out terribly, but that's okay. You gotta start somewhere. But that brings me into our first oddity. I want you to take a look at this cell. This is a cell from the Lone Ranger series. For the longest time, this Lone Ranger cell has sat in my collection. I never thought twice of it. If you would ask me to sell all my cells but keep 50, I don't even think this would make the top 50. Now it's become one of my favorite cells in my collection. And at first, you don't notice the subtlety of it or the beauty of it, because it looks like a pretty standard cell. But one of the things that is unique to this cell out of all the cells in my collection is the background. The background was done with oil pastels. All the shadows and details that you see in the rocks and in the canyon and in the grass and in the trees, that's all done with oil pastel on a separate cell level behind the painting. That in itself is unique. On top, we do have the standard writing that breaks down the seams, which I think is interesting that they use tape as opposed to just writing it straight on. But then I saw peeking in the background wait a second, they didn't paint the background. They used colored paper and ripped it off and plastered it on there like a collage. And I looked over and over and it was everywhere. This entire background is a mixed media masterpiece. I never realized this when I watched the clips from the show, and I never noticed this before. The white trail here, also done with oil pastel. Every single thing about this cell looks relatively normal until you start to examine it and you realize how special it truly is. And that's why it's become one of my favorite cells in my collection. Because prior to this, I think I just bid on this because it was signed. It was more of an impulse buy than anything else. But now, this is such an amazing piece of problem solving in animation. On top of that, it is probably the best use of mixed media in animation that I have in my collection. And prior to me examining this, I had no idea of all the amazing secrets that were part of this cell. So what are some of the other things I've been doing in the background? Well, I got a bunch of new cell vinyl paints, and I've been updating my color chart. And of course, I'm still plugging away on that comic book. Here's a teaser of the cover. I'm just waiting on some additional background art. So for this project, I pretty much used exclusively Chromacolour, and that's for the outlines as well as the painting. So I decided to paint the retro blue version of Venom. After painting HBO style Wolverine and the Raphael in grayscale, I kind of just wanted to use a little bit of color. I also got a new shipment of Chromacolour paints, so there was a lot of blues that I had never had a chance to use. The actual cell is a 12F cell from Chromacolour, and for the line art, I used Sumi ink for the black, and I used Chromacolour paint for the colored outlines, using my 5-to-1 mix, that's 5 part paint to 1 part distilled water, in order to give it a little bit of fluidity so that I could use it on a nib. Welcome to Oddity number 2, and this one is kind of a mystery. I have no idea where this is from, but this one is kind of interesting. It's just the Duga, and it's very well done, and I wanted to show you because it kind of shows you the different line art and where the colored line art will go. But this is where it starts to get a little bit odd for me. The back side of that paper has like shadowing done, and I really want to track down this animation, so if you know the name of it, please put it below. And I think this must be another sheet that came with it. I'm assuming it's like a director's note. I don't know for sure. And then this must have been the correction sheet that they gave the animator to make some details, I suppose. Like I said, a lot of this is a mystery to me because I don't read Japanese. Why are all these sheets part of it? I don't know. But it allows me to theorize and come up with my own ideas, and that in itself is kind of fun. This I do know what it is. This looks like a timing sheet. I wish I knew more about the show that this is from, but I don't. I've also got a new set of LED filaments in, and I wanted to quickly show people really how it works because I got a question about how I did the LEDs earlier, and it's very simple. You just need to get one of these casings, preferably one with an on-off switch because they do sell them without an on-off switch, and then you just hook up the red wire and the black wire to the positive and negative. You can solder them. I prefer to use hot glue over soldering because soldering is very permanent. And it's also very risky on the cell if any of that solder falls off. I've had mishaps of that in the past. The glue gun, for the most part, even if you get some on the cell, you can clean it up and still work with it, and it doesn't damage your painting too much. I've really been enjoying Marvel Rivals, but my first real introduction to Spider-Man was the 90s Fox animated show, and I love that show. It kind of resonated with me a little bit different than the X-Men show. The X-Men show had multiple protagonists and it was just really cool and full of action. The Spider-Man one was more of a personal story and there was a bit of more of a journey for me. It was the original cinematic universe. There were just so many crossover characters with Ghost Rider, Blade, Black Cat, Storm, Wolverine, Captain America. You can keep going on all the characters that guest starred in the show. When I first started collecting cells, I thought X-Men and Spider-Man cells would be the biggest part of my collection. And although I found a lot of X-Men cells, I could never really find a Spider-Man cell. Every once in a while, I'll find one that's like really ridiculously priced. And after a lot of research and investigation, I think I've come to the discovery, and the show was animated using the cap system. I found articles that say it was. So these cells are probably reproductions or maybe backgrounds done afterwards. But either way, it's a bit of a heartbreaking thing because Some of the characters in the Spider-Man show are still to this day my favorite character, and I really would have loved to sell them. And this is some production art from the 90s Spider-Man series. I don't know for sure whether these are cells or not. It has a official seal on there, and I have a certificate that says it's a production cell or production art, but every single thing about it is kind of confusing to me. It looks like it's hand painted, and you can tell that here because we're going to go into the ribs of Spider-Man, and you can see that there's some line art that's done by Nib on the outside of it, as well as on his back. There's some paint inconsistencies where the colors change. That indicates to me that it was hand painted, but all my research in the past has said that they used the cap system to animate this and that there were no cells made, so it leaves me a little bit confused. They did put these numbers on the top, but I've seen that with other limited edition run cells. But here's the next confusing thing. It looks like it was ripped off the background, and that's actually very common with animation cells. I still in my gut don't think that this is actually an animation cell, but I still think it's a really cool, unique piece. It has all the scene headings and numbers on the top, but is it an animation cell? I don't think so. I've done a few of these cell conversions now, and there's always a few unique challenges or problems that arise when you're doing them. And for this one was translating it. Marvel Rivals is a beautiful game, but there is a lot of diffusion and changing in gradients of colors. And their lighting source, even though it feels like it's motivated, they also put a little bit of accents on the characters that don't really feel as motivated as they should. It kind of almost comes out of nowhere. They hit you with these big blasts of white light, and it's absolutely visually beautiful, but it's hard to translate that on a cell. For this cell, I use 5 types of blue. I think I use 1 or 2 more, but let's just say at least 5. And that's not really realistic if you were cell painting this. And I know that's one of the disadvantages of cell painting, and that's why a lot of people choose to do digital coloring. So when I was converting this, I really had a tough time of deciding where to use my colors, because I don't have the luxury as a cell painter of kind of doing a diffusion. So I decided to pick colors based upon whether they were going to become part of the symbiote coming out of him or whether they were going to make part of the bodysuit. But at the end of the day, it was really a bit of a challenge to kind of make it all work together. And this is another Spider-Man cell that I bought at the same time as the other. I haven't examined this one since I got it autographed by Stan Lee, and I didn't really want to take it out of the bag, but this one looks more like the background is original background and the actual cell is just probably a recreation on top. Because of Stan Lee's passing, I just didn't want to risk it and take it out of the bag, but it still has all the same hallmarks and all the same traits that the other one has. And whether these are cells or recreations, I don't really know for sure. I tend to think that they're recreations, but the odd thing about it is, these were the first cells I ever bought with the X-Men one that aren't actually cells, but that started my passion in my collecting of animation cells. Are they real cells? Probably not. Every bit of research I've done has indicated that the Spider-Man animated series was done in the CAPS digital system. But are they oddities? Absolutely. And the last behind the scenes I'm going to leave you with is this background. I won't tell you where it's from. Maybe you guys can guess. But this is going to be my first attempt at animating something. This painting had its challenges. Those symbiotic threads going all over the place, I lost track of them more times than I can count. But the team at Marvel Rivals did an amazing job designing this character, and I had a lot of fun painting it, and I think it turned out great. In fact, I'm actually kind of tempted to paint another character from this. Thanks for watching. More videos coming soon. I'm Brian, and this is Vinyl Paints.